I define the word productivity by understanding what's most important to you and really prioritizing what's important and what can be done now, what can be done next week, what can be long term, what has to be done short term. I think it's productive. It's working towards something you want to achieve, whether that's for you, your family, for your business, whatever it is, and try not to sweat the small stuff that everybody seems to think is important, but really isn't.
Welcome to the Sonya Barlow Show. My name is Sonya Barlow, and I am the host of this very authentic audio and video-based podcast. Ultimately, I wanted to interview ordinary people who are becoming extraordinary all over the world. It's me, my camera, and my recorder sharing real-life, authentic interviews with people on the ground. I really wanted to create something which doesn't necessarily exist on the internet today, and that's no noise, no clutter, to-the-point conversations with very cool people all over the world. Most of our content, if not all of it, is directed by you, our listener, our watcher, and our audience member, so thank you. If you have any questions that you want to answer, if you want to be a part of the show, or if you're just interested in where we're traveling next, drop me a line, hello@sonyabarlow.co.uk or @sonyabarlowuk. I won't keep you any longer because we have amazing interviews lined up from people all over the world, so let's get straight into the chat. Amy, thank you for joining us on this episode. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thank you. It's been a long summer so far.
Productive summer?
Productive as you can be when you own a business and have 3 kids, I'd say. Like all other working mothers out there, make it work somehow. Yeah. But no, it's been good. It's been actually unusually busy for August. It's usually quite dead in August.
I feel that too. I'm like, why are people emailing me?
Yeah, I know. I want to be on my holidays. I want to be relaxing.
Why are you on a podcast in August? You know what I mean? Like, why are you here? The word productivity is a weird word, right? Because now you have people who are like productivity influencers, the most productivity hacked person in the world. And then you have other people who are struggling with their levels of productivity, understanding what it means, how you define it. How do you define the word productivity?
I think I define the word productivity by understanding what's most important to you and really prioritizing what's important and what can be done now, what can be done next week, what's the long term, what can be long term, what has to be done short term. I think it's productive. It's working towards something you want to achieve, whether that's for you, your family, for your business, whatever it is, and try not to sweat the small stuff that everybody seems to think is important, but really isn't.
It must be super hard running a business with 3 kids.
It's difficult because I think staying at home with 3 kids is actually also very difficult if you're a full-time mother. You have no escape from it, whereas I really enjoy running my business and having something for me and having something away from my children. But at the same time, it's a lot of transferable skills when you're being a mum and you're running a business as well. It's just about being efficient, making good use of your time, juggling plates, that kind of thing. It is difficult. And there are some days where you think, oh, God, I need a break. I really, really need a break. But a lot of the times I'm really grateful to have built a career that sort of almost allows me to also be present for my kids as well. And I know not everyone has that luxury.
No, and I think you made a really interesting point. One thing that really bothers me is why there's so many parents who can't get back into the world of work when you basically have the skills that you require in a workplace. Especially with like mothers, we've seen as a consequence of the pandemic and flexible working, and now a lot of companies wanting to go back into being in the office, they don't have the same return to work systems. And I'm like, how does that make sense? Because moms are like budget holders, they're the financiers, they are the operations, they are able to collaborate in teams and also like handle crisis.
Absolutely. And I think women are actually really good communicators as well. So I think they're very important to have as part of teams. And actually, when I started my agency, I like to think it's slightly improved now, but I was going to loads of networking events and I just had my baby and I was meeting loads of women who went, oh, I worked for DKNY for 6 years, or I've worked for these massive brands for however many years, but they want me back in 5 days a week, 9 till 6. And I said, I literally cannot make it work. And they said, I'm doing an admin job now. And I think there's nothing wrong with doing an admin job, but there was all this wasted talent out there not being used, and a lot of women and possibly some fathers being forced out of workplaces because they couldn't possibly make it work with their family life. And it's just not realistic. And there are some fantastic campaigners like Mother Pucker and a White House out there who are doing great work to educate people in workplaces and about being inclusive of parents, not just parents, but people who are carers as well and have other responsibilities outside of work, because there's all this amazing talent.
And they've just launched like a flexible working bill.
Yeah.
And obviously within workspaces, you are now enabled or empowered to request flexible working. It depends on if the workplace can give you that or not. But now you've got businesses who have like you've got businesses who have built their business or being remote first, like Zoom, who are now asking people to come back to the office. And you're like, well, if Zoom can't figure it out, I don't know if there's any luck for the rest of us.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting. There's a bit of there's more and more places are saying, right, we want people back in, bums on seats again. I don't really know what sort of forcing that change, because I think actually through the pandemic, so many of us worked very effectively and actually achieved a much better work-life balance and happiness through being able to, instead of finishing at 5 and going home to commuting, they'd hop off to the gym really quickly and be back home at a decent time. And lots of people are just happier for it. I'm only speaking from my experience as well. I think there are some people that really enjoy having a load of creatives in one room and being able to connect on a
So like from an innovation standpoint, yes, being in person is probably better than having interactive sticky notes, right?
Yeah, sure.
Or like if you're making really quick, snappy decisions or maybe board meetings. But otherwise, yeah, to your point, you can basically do everything efficiently, if not better, because we've proven that over the pandemic.
Yeah,
so when did you start your business?
2014. So my son was about 5 months old. Yeah. And I just moved back from Australia and I'd wanted to start Lucky 8 for a really long time. And I thought, I'm not going to go back and work for someone else. I'll finally use this opportunity to do it.
Why is it called Lucky 8?
I have Chinese heritage. My father's from Hong Kong. I lived there for quite a long time. It's quite a big part of my identity. And I was really stuck with the name. And actually, I hashed it out with, I'm from a really big family. And we all sat at dinner trying to think of names. And my sister came up with it. And I don't know, felt right. And I've stuck with it for quite a few years.
So before we get into your business side, I think that's really interesting. And I'd really like to unpack that a little bit. You've got big families and you sat around the dinner table. Now, I'm also blessed to come from a biggish family, and there's 4 siblings, like amazing in-laws, and a niece that has completely rocked our world. And I think the point I'm trying to make is we also as a family tend to make business decisions together. So not like this is how you run your business, but hey, I have an idea. What do you think about this idea as a family?
Yeah.
Or, oh, I want to now start a YouTube channel. And my family were like, yeah, you should go for it. And I was like, should I? Like, are you sure? And actually at some point they were the ones who encouraged me to do this, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I would have been sitting in my fear and I would have been like, hey, who's going to watch me? Who's going to want to come on my podcast? Who's going to want to do X, Y, Z?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people don't understand that culture.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm really lucky. I'm one of 6. I'm the eldest of 6, and we're very entrepreneurial.
You're the eldest of 6. Yeah. We can break down some like eldest kids problems now, because I'm the eldest of 4.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's a whole different. It's a whole different.
No, I feel like I already know people management already from just being the eldest of 6 kids. My youngest sister's 15 years. My very youngest sister's 15 years younger than me. I feel like her other mum. Like
my brother's 11 years different.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I get more concerned about him than my mother. And I'm like,
yeah.
Oh my God, you're breaking my heart. And he's like, I'm not your kid. I was like, I know, but
it feels like so much like you are.
Sorry, but going back to your eldest.
I'm the eldest of 6. I'm from a very entrepreneurial family. My father was self-employed, had a manufacturing business over in Hong Kong. My mum is like, she wasn't working as such, but running a family of 6, I've learned a lot of my skills from her, of people management, never being afraid to do anything, never take no for an answer within reason. And she's got a real tenacity that I've learned from her. And actually everybody in my family has always been not scared to fail. They say, try it. I think you could do it. And they've been really good. We've been good cheerleaders for each other, and actually don't choose the path which feels like the most straightforward. Really, we're behind you. We've got you. Doesn't work out. Pivot, think of something else or whatever. But they've been immensely supportive. And every time I've said I want to do something, they're always like, yeah, do it. Don't be scared. And it's really good to have that. I feel very lucky to have that network.
I agree with you as well. And I think a big part of that is, especially as the eldest, in an East Asian family, in an Asian family, coming from the continent of Asia, very similar in a lot of ways. The fact that possibly both of us have been given the opportunity to be curious and to be confident and to communicate, I think those 3 C's as a kid changes everything.
Yeah.
Because for me, people are like, how are you so confident? I'm like, I'm confident because I don't know any other way, because my parents literally gave me the opportunity to communicate and they encouraged me to be curious. And though I wasn't always confident in certain things when I was younger, I was always confident enough to have an opinion. And so you have to justify your opinion, of course, but also when you're the eldest, you also have to remember, or at least you feel like you're responsible for your other siblings in a way where you have to be a good role model and you have to be a representation and you have to make sure that the world is tough, right? So my thinking is, the world is tough. How do I make sure that, because we don't come from networks, we don't come from wealth, it's like, how do I make sure I make that process a little bit easier for my siblings?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you do feel a pressure to be a role model. Whether they would agree with me or not if they were here in this room, I don't know, because I am a bit of I'm quite a mothering, I feel, a mothering position where I'm there if they're upset or anything like that. But I think this happens with a lot of firstborns. They do feel a responsibility to do the right thing all the time. And like everybody else can be that little bit more rebellious.
Were you rebellious?
No.
I was not either. And a part of me is like, I wish I was a bit rebellious, because what's the worst that would have happened? Like, I didn't even bunk school.
No.
Okay, good.
Definitely not.
Because I say that, people are like, you didn't bunk school. I was like, I didn't bunk school.
I don't know if you had this. Again, Asian parents or what have you. I think I felt like not trying hard's not an option. Do you know what I mean? Like, I found that anyway. Like, my parents have a really good work ethic, and that's pushed down to all of us as well. And yeah, I don't know. I didn't want to get in trouble in school. Like, I wanted to just show up and do what needed to be done. And if I was struggling, have the confidence to say, but and not rebel and bunk off school.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my parents were like, listen, I mean, they moved from Pakistan. They were like, and consciously and subconsciously were like, okay, you have to do well. And my parents were like, just go work hard, get a degree. And even if something doesn't work out, as long as you've worked and you feel like you've done everything you can for it, it doesn't matter. Yeah. And I would say I wasn't rebellious. Yes, I chatted a lot in school, and I could be quite argumentative. But because I was a high achieving student back in that day, I realized a lot of my symptoms, especially my neurodiversity, which is now something that I'm unlocking, like my ADHD, and I've had chronic migraines for a while. I was really good at masking them in the school system, especially when your teachers are more or less on your side. I made really good friends with my teachers in the sense of like, I think your teachers are your school parents, right? So for me, it's like, I want to respect you because, listen, you're not getting paid a lot to do this job. You clearly want to be here, right?
Yeah.
It's not
absolutely.
Like, yes, there's a point of desperation, but most teachers aren't there because they're desperate. Most teachers are there because they want to.
Yeah, because they choose that path, don't they? Right? And yeah, they've got something to give.
Exactly. And the sooner you understand that, the better I think it is for everyone. And so I wasn't rebellious. I did get into arguments, but because you were academic, you can cloud over that and be like, well, she gets her grades, so the rest of it doesn't really matter. But I didn't bunk. I didn't sneak off. I didn't didn't really lie. I don't really know how you can lie to your parents if you're the eldest. It's actually really difficult.
No,
they find out.
No, but I'm also just.
So am I.
You know, they see right.
But I think that's an eldest thing. Is your youngest rebellious?
Yes.
Yeah.
And most of us have followed a fairly linear path of relationships and work, whereas she's completely wants to do her own thing. And
my brother,
get married, I don't know,
100%. My brother's going to be watching this. My brother is rebellious, but at the same time, I find his confidence to figure out his own identity, his own character quite admirable, because I don't think at that age I was that confident enough to figure out who I was exactly and be quite like affirmative with it.
Yeah.
I think I was still kind of being pushed around by people. Whereas I find that the new generation, yes, they have social media as a comparison, and yes, they don't really have true friends, right? That's what they say. And they feel a bit isolated and lonely, but they have this sense of freedom of figuring out who they are and who they want to be. And they're not just like going where the wind flows. They're taking a moment to be like, does this align with what I want? And okay, let me figure it out for 6 months. And if it doesn't, I'll try something
And
else.
I think there was a time that wasn't really a thing.
No.
At all. Like, it's, you do what's expected of you.
Absolutely.
Whereas actually now I think that there's a generation coming through like, does this make me happy? Because actually there's a lot of people, particularly from my generation, when I started in work, mental health was not a thing. No one.
No.
You've been crying in the toilets. So you get someone else, that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot more emphasis and respect for people's long-term happiness from what they get from their jobs, which is great.
And your job makes you happy?
Yes, it does.
And you work in PR?
Yes, I work in PR.
How did your parents take you working in PR?
Well, my father knew very little about what it was, I'd say. I think, again, I've got one of those jobs where I'm working with so many different clients, different events, different things I'm excited about. Sometimes I think they both get a little bit bamboozled with exactly what it is I'm doing on a daily basis. But yeah, they're incredibly supportive, and it's a creative industry, which I think they always knew I was going to go into as well. So yeah, just.
But as the eldest, you didn't have a Amy, we want you or expect you to do this. Or what I've heard from like Chinese culture, I may be completely wrong, and I've seen it on movies, right, which is like my reference point, if that's okay.
Of course.
Is they're like, when you're younger, you have kids that are like on this mat, and they're like, you can be a doctor, you can be X, you can be Y, you can be Y, and then you see where the kid goes. And I don't know what show that was, but I saw that specifically as like a reference point. I was like, maybe I don't know if that's like stereotyping.
No, it's not stereotyping.
Okay, fine.
It's a real thing that happens. However, well, my mum is from the UK, so she's there to balance out my dad and bring him back to earth a little bit as well. I was brought up in, I'd say, more of a Western household, even though because it's mother tongue, what your mother speaks, and what the person you spend the most time with is your mother usually, so you adopt a lot of her attitudes. But I did feel growing up that all they really wanted was, I'm not an academic person, so I'll put that out, but I am a hard worker and very diligent. So that's all that they really wanted me to do, was to try my best, but also nurture my interests. I was quite good at arts and things like that. And they were incredibly supportive with that. But I think they knew that was not going to be my path. I was not going to be a lawyer. I was not going to be a doctor. I was not going to be an accountant. That does not serve my talents whatsoever. I'm just an exception to the rule. I cannot do maths. It's not my area at all. So I think from an early age, I was never really pushed in that direction, but I was told I had to try hard and set a good example.
So did you go to university?
Yes,
What did you study?
I did English literature because I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
And I read a lot and I liked to write. And at the time I thought I wanted to be a magazine editor. I did lots of work experience with magazines when magazines were still
a
really big thing, I know, then less of a thing now. And then I got an opportunity to get involved with the PR side of things, which is the opposite side. We work hand in hand with magazines a lot. We send them news. They need us to.
So for people who don't know what PR is, can you break it down for us? Because I think a lot of people, including myself, sometimes get confused with what is PR and what is marketing.
Well, marketing is direct to customer. So that might be your website, your social media, your newsletters, things that you create yourself as a brand and send directly out to potential clients or customers or whatever. Whereas PR, I own Lucky 8 PR. It's a PR agency, and we manage a brand's publicity, their reputation via the press. So if you owned a fashion brand, you think, I want to have my clothes seen in all these publications that people really trust and love and have read for a long time. It's good for my reputation. I would facilitate that, making sure that I get those brands seen in the right publications that their customers would be reading.
How do you create those relationships between PR and
journalists and magazines and things? Yeah, absolutely. So for me, what started is I was working for other agencies. So when I started out my career, and I do think that's important before you go and start your own business, so it was for me anyway, was to learn from people who are more experienced than you and have those doors open to you because they already have relationships with those journalists. So I was working for other PR agencies. We'd do events, we'd do like little meet and greets where you go and meet them for coffee, talk about the brands you're having, and I'd tag along and get to meet them in that way. And then when I started my own agency, that's what I started doing with my clients as well. And it can take years to build these relationships, but you just working in it for so long, things do change a lot, but you're constantly talking to these publications, seeing who's moving where, who's new that's coming in, making sure you go and meet them, introducing yourself, and always presenting to them only things you think they'd be interested in. And that's a good way to get your emails picked up, basically. If I'm going to a journalist with something which I think is quite fun, but actually their readers would never want to buy it, then I'm wasting their time. They'll stop opening my emails. So.
And how do you find their details? Like, let's say you're going for company X, but you don't know anyone there and you've never worked with them, but that's something your client's really interested in. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? It just looks like new business, cold calling, cold emailing.
Yeah. So if you were a business on your own, trying to reach out and do a bit of your own PR.
Well, no, even if I came to you and I was like, hey, Amy, I really want to work with X brand and you're like, Sonya, I have no relationships there, what would you then do? Would you go and create those relationships?
Yeah. So is this if you want to work with a brand or a magazine or both? If it was a brand I had absolutely no contact with before, then I'd put together a very good pitch about why they should be interested in you, why it benefits them to work with you as well, what you could be offering. And then I would find out who works in the press department. It would be literally calling their head office and then saying, I need a contact for the press department. I'd usually start with an email. I'd follow up with a call and just try and say, look, can we have a meeting? That kind of thing. Can we just do a Zoom? Sometimes I think relationships are easier to build when you can talk to them personally and you get a vibe for what they're interested in as well and how you can make it work for them. So, but in terms of publications, say you really wanted to be seen in, I don't know, Vogue, you think your product is fantastic and you think they would really like it, then I'd probably say the right thing to do is buy the magazine, understand what the content is, who writes it. Usually that'll be styled by such and such or whatever, or at the end of an article on a website, it would be who's written it. And then you can find out who they are. You can Google their email address, or you can find out the name of the publishing house and then ask for an email address. So yeah, it's just a bit of research, really.
It's research and sourcing.
Yeah.
And the alternative to companies coming to you is doing PR on their own. At what point can companies no longer do PR on their own and have to come to you?
Well, a lot don't want to do it themselves at all. They've literally just launched and say, I don't have the time for this, because PR is quite a tireless job. You're trying to break above the noise of everybody else that is also speaking to that journalist and wanting to get their attention. Some people don't have the skills to understand what's going to make them open that email. But I own like a I have a consultancy part of the business as well, which I help people run their PR themselves, but like I could create strategies, write press releases, tips and advice, and that kind of
like a DIY PR, which is what I've seen coming up a lot recently.
Yes, it is, but it's more, rather than a short term, it's like a long-term partnership. We're helping you achieve what you need through PR with like long-term strategy, always there to be answering questions for you. Something's not sticking, we'll talk about why, change, pivot and change and all that kind of thing. But some people, you can do your PR yourself to begin with if you're really pushed for budget, which I think is totally understandable, but you need to be prepared to really stick at it. A lot of follow-up.
What is the benefit of doing PR though? Like apart from coverage, because I guess my point being is, does PR result in conversion? Does it result in sales?
Yes and no. So really it's twofold. Sometimes, yes, you get the right kind of PR, the right time, just the right audience. Yeah, you could sell out. Amazing. Other times you're thinking, I've been featured in Glamour, I've been featured in Marie Claire or whatever. And actually that's more these household names that are approving your brand, basically. So it's a brand awareness, it's gravitas as well for being seen in those publications. And it's a collective thing that you're doing alongside your social media, alongside your marketing for brand awareness and credibility as well.
And you use the word pitch. Now, I am not great at pitching myself on email. And I'm really good at pitching myself maybe in person. And I do get a lot of opportunities, but I have to say I'm very fortunate they come to me.
Yeah.
But when I pitch, my God, it does not work. And it's something I'm building in terms of skill set and learning, because I don't know how to pitch, right? It's not something you're born with. What does a good pitch look like to you?
A good pitch? Well, I would say journalists get a lot of emails and they don't have a lot of time. So you really want to lead with the most important points. I think it's who, what, where, when, or why, or something like that. That's not making me sound very professional, but you have to put all the most important information at the beginning, make it very visual as well. You might even want to put bullet points, say, hello, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is my brand, here's the things you need to know, here's some images, here's our website, here's a Dropbox to more images, let me know if you'd like some more information and that kind of thing. So I think it's being really to the point. And actually, it depends if your brand is very visual, but good photos make such a difference with press as well, because there's a lot of brands out there who aren't doing it properly and they don't have a chance. If your images aren't up to scratch, you might as well forget it, because they're not going to it'd be too much hard work for them to have to feature you. So I'd really suggest investing properly in good photography. If it's you yourself as an expert you're pushing, or it's a brand and product, get some really strong photography for press, and that's going to up your chances a lot. But like I say, keep it to the point, very visual, and have a good press release as well in case they do want to read more granular details about your brand as well.
Super interesting. I think because I just tend to talk a lot, I think I tend to write a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm guilty of that as well. I've had to really strip back my pictures because I go into far too much detail. I think.
Were you always good at PR?
I was always good at writing press releases because I did English literature. I like to write. So I was really quick with that. And that was like my thing in my agency. Somebody needs a press release, doing quick. Bam, over to Amy, I'll do it quickly. I think so. I've learned to be more confident, and I've actually always been good at talking to people. I tend to be able to go into any room and chat to people quite easily, no matter who it is. Yeah, I think there were definitely skills that I had naturally that came well, that lend me well in PR, I think.
But then I guess in PR you have to face a lot of rejection. How do you overcome the rejection? How do you not feel like a failure?
Do you know what? This is something I really dislike about PR, is that actually you can have a great product, you can do all the right things, you can push it out to press, all above board, everything's fantastic. However, for some reason, it's just not landing. And actually, this is something I speak to with all PRs. So that is very difficult. And then it's not good for your reputation to show that you're working really hard, but you don't have the results to show for it. This is why I've been quite good at understanding and taking on brands I think only have really good potential, because otherwise you're taking people's money and knowing that you've got fairly limited chances of press or what have you, and that's just no good for anybody in the long run. But I don't know though.
It does, but it also makes me think about what you've just said, which is, well, at least my follow-up question is, how do you therefore know who good brands are, and how do you know what kind of niche you want to focus on?
In terms of good brands, I guess it comes with years of experience of knowing what's press worthy, knowing what is important to consumers at the moment. Like right now, and something for me, it's like sustainability within fashion is very important. So it feels like that's a great element of a business that I'm looking for. Female led is very important to me. Similar to me being from a diverse background as well, I like supporting women of colour. I also, within the art industry, because I love art and I do PR for artists, I'll only work with female artists because it's an underserved part of the industry as well. So that's very up and coming. So, and visually, it has to look good as well, because if it doesn't, press won't be interested because they're selling a product which is designed to inspire. So there's all those elements, and it depends who they're trying to promote their product to as well. There's different things that are important to different audiences, basically. And I just have to make sure there's enough there that's strong to that brand in order to be able to successfully place them.
Have you ever had any difficult clients? Do you want to share a story with me?
Sure. I mean, this was quite early on, and I learned from this, so I'm trying not to think of it.
No, nothing is a bad thing. And I think you learn from, we are constantly learning, right? So you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Well, I worked in the very early days with a very talented designer who, it's strange because I had alarm bells from day one, but I was new and I thought this will be good for my business. The money was decent. And I made that mistake of going, I'm just going to do it and it'll be fine. I'm a hard worker. It'll be okay. Her and herself, she was quite, she was overworked, overbusy, had no room for manners, which actually I've got no time for people with no manners, basically. And she was a person that peddled through PR agencies, and that should have been my first sign to stay well clear. So I decided that I'd been spoken to badly enough times that I said, look, we're I was very polite. I said, we're overservicing the account, meaning we're not spending enough time on the other clients. I think it might be best if we go our separate ways this time. No animosity. I didn't say how I really felt. And she was like, well, I'm not going to pay you. And I should have done it after she paid my last invoice, but she didn't. And she's like, I'm not going to pay it. So I ended up taking it to small claims court. I spoke to all her previous PR agencies. She'd done it to all of them as well. And this is when I was new. I just had a baby as well. I really needed the money, mortgage to pay. And I found that quite stressful. And then somebody come back and say that you had actually not done a good enough job or what have you, when it just wasn't true. So yeah, and I did learn from that though. If you have alarm bells from day one, where you have those initial meetings and you think, I'm not going to be able to work with this person I only work with people I like on a personal level. I think that's a good basis, I think, for creating good work together.
So what are some alarm bells that people should be aware of in this industry, right? Because you're a PR person who runs business. You're also an entrepreneur or a small business owner. You work with journalists and marketers, and then you work with people, you work with influencers. You're doing a lot of people management all the time. What are some alarm bells when you're working with influencers? Okay. Like they've not paid any attention to my pitch. They just say, oh, here's my address, send me stuff or whatever, that kind of thing. I want to know there's a mutual interest there to create some good content. And when it's influencer gifting, nothing is guaranteed, but I want them to show that they've thought about it, and it's not just going to end up in another pile of stuff that they've been sent that day in their box room and I'll never see it again. Do you know what I mean? I want them to go, I love this because of that. Like, oh, I'm really interested in this kind of thing. Great, let's send it. Let's see how I get on with it. And then they have a good dialogue going with you. But people who say yes and then drop off the face of the earth, I think that can happen. So I think really pick your influencers carefully. How do you pick influencers? How do PRs pick influencers to work with? So good example being, I am somewhat of an influencer. And the reason I say that with hesitancy, I'm like, I'm not a massive influencer. I'm like a content creator, influential person. I've got a blue tick, right? I've got the foundations, let's say, but I don't have the massive following. So how can I better my profile to work with PRs, and why would PRs want to work with me?
Well, what I look for when I'm looking for influencers is, first I need to understand who the brand's customers are. And I think, who are they following? I have a good understanding what their demographic is. So I'd make sure I do my research. Do they work with similar brands? What kind of tagging do they do? What kind of content do they make? Does that align with my brand as well? What's their engagement like? Because their engagement is actually loads more important than how many followers they've got. There are followers, we've worked with brands who they've got followers in the millions, and we get very little return from it because their engagement is rubbish. Whereas we've had micro influencers, even like 20,000 followers and under, who've done incredibly well for us because it's the right influence, it's the right audience, rather than a huge mass of people who aren't technically right for that brand. So in terms of what you can do, I think you do what already.
Thank you.
You're very.
That's all I've been waiting for the whole podcast. I'm like, just a validation.
Validate me, please.
Validation from a PR. I've made it.
But be very clear what you're in.
Oh, I
speciality.
I'm interested in a lot of things.
Yeah, but then almost like to me, you might think, oh, there's more I'm not putting out there. You were mentioning travel earlier. Before we started recording. More of that. Maybe you should begin putting out there content for you as like a travel expert or somebody that's very well traveled. But really at the moment, I think of you as somebody who is championing women in business, helping grow confidence for women, and like with the everyday hustle as well. Like,
thank you so much. This was not planned, but I would take it. I'm just trying to show up online as a whole vibe. You know what I mean? As in, like, for me, it's not about the gifting. It's not about the goodies. Like, that's just a perk. But for me, it's going back to what we were saying earlier. I'm an elder sister. I am not born in the UK per se, but the UK, like London has made me for sure. I'm also a brown-skinned woman who is neurodivergent, which is a very new label that I've now accepted, but it's always been there. And I guess my point is that a lot of me showing up is for the representation. It's so that whoever looks at this and is like, oh, Sonya can do it, I can do it too, because you absolutely can. And it's so that we can change this narrative around who we consider as an influencer or an influential person, or whose voice counts, or whose face counts, or what an ideal successful person stereotype looks like.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really important for me. The rest of it is all the perks and it's the fun. And I know that when I first started getting invites to my PR events and when I've bits in general, I was like, oh my God, I have made it. Like I am, oh my God, I'm on someone's list. They want me here.
Yeah.
But actually, after a while, it was so exhausting and it was tiring. And I think I deprioritized my business and I up the priority and like going to these events, and actually you realize that you're not just going there for 1 hour, but it's like half a day to a day's work, because you want to show up, you want to do well, you want to network, you want to collaborate, you want to create content, you want to stay in touch, and you're like, hey, is this actually serving me? Like, got invited to a really cool event, right, where I from a perfume business.
Yeah.
Loved. I don't wear perfume, not because I don't wear it's because I have migraines, and actually a lot of perfume smells now flare up my migraines.
Okay.
But because it was one of the first events I went to, I got there early. I spent half a day there. I mingled with people that honestly have very little to do with my own industry. There's no real like next step and value add. But I would say what was meant to be an hour event probably took me 6 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is sometimes some people don't really respect what influencers do as well, because they go, oh, what, however many grand for one post. I'm thinking, you don't know how much work it takes to build a network, though, and to build that following and to build connections with brands. It's all that unpaid work you don't see.
Absolutely.
But I think understanding what is going to serve you, and like I've noticed this, and particularly since I've had kids, what's worth my time in the office. So for me, if it's like, I like to work with a lot of up and coming female artists, so I go to all the art fairs, Affordable Art Fair and the other art fair. Those are definitely worth my time, because I always come away meeting somebody interesting or somebody I'm going to work with later. But yeah, I think just being more selective.
But that's a great point you've made, right? It's about knowing your time and knowing where to put your effort. And it brings us back to being the eldest daughter conversation, also being a global majority or minority person in the workspace, but also running your own business. Even for you, the reason why I guess you are building a PR firm and you have your niches is because you know that's where you want to invest your time. And so you're doing all you can for that set group of stuff versus being a jack of all trades.
Yeah, exactly. Because I do get brands come to me which I have not a clue what it's all about. And I think you could stumble through it and try, but I think I've got no passion for it. I don't know the industry well. And as lovely as it would be to take your cash, I'm not going to do a good job, and it's not going to be good for me in the long run if I don't do an excellent job at it. So yeah, I think I really do try and stick to all the areas that I'm interested in. I'm passionate about particular within those industries as well, like mother-led brands, female-led brands, brands by women of diverse backgrounds, female artists.
Has there ever been a brand that approached you and you were like, no, not right now, and then they blew up and you're like, I wish I was on their PR radar?
No. Well, I don't know if I should be specific or not, but I did work with a really big viral beauty brand, which are huge now. They're like, they were Forbes 30 under 30 list makers, and I launched the brand and did a really good job of it. And they were hoping to work with me long term, but in terms of budget, they couldn't make it work. And I was like, I just don't think I can make it work. And now they were enormous. But I'm glad to have said that I did launch them, at least. I'd love to still be working with them because I love everything that they do. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have turned away anybody enormous before who's grown to.
Do you have any regrets?
I regret in the early days being a bit of a yes woman.
Okay.
Yeah, so particularly with that brand that I was talking about, I would be bossed around a lot and talked to like they owned me, saying yes even though it's not in my job title. And I don't mind that, working slightly outside of what my remit is if it's to get the job done on occasion. But being allowed to be spoken to in a way that actually really demotivated me and started to question my confidence. And actually I'm going, no, actually this isn't me. And just taking on much more than I had promised. And that has detriment to the rest of your life as well.
Yeah, I can see that. And so when you talk about confidence, you talk about building your network and having the credibility, how do you know how to price yourself then when it comes to PR? I always find pricing, like PR pricing, just honestly, it's just the wildest thing.
Yeah, and it is difficult. And this is something I have had to build confidence to actually price what I'm worth. I actually didn't change my pricings for years. And then the girls I was working with, they said, Amy, you are insane. I said, all the years you've got behind you since the first time you set those pricings and the things that you've achieved. I think also because my agency, it's a small agency, it's a boutique. We're remote. I don't have a sexy studio in Soho or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I felt like I can't possibly charge as much as them, but yeah, I'm achieving the same things as they are, if not more often. And I've had small brands leave big agencies and come to me. So I used to be very modest with my pricing and be more like, is this okay? That kind of thing. And actually now I think, no, I understand what a director of my many years behind me is supposed to be charging, and that's what I charge. And I think, how long will it take me to do this job for what they want me to achieve? And then I price it based on that. And there is huge discrepancies in PR fees, but it depends how experienced that person is that you're working with.
And I also think there's a little bit of a secret there that people don't share. So I got UK Entrepreneur of the Year in 2022, and I got my own blazer at the back of it. And I should have done more PR wise, right? I was super excited by it, but I didn't quite know how to finesse that opportunity. I didn't do what I could have. There's a lot of, in hindsight, I should have done this and that. But I remember I reached out to a couple of PR agencies and they were like, okay, so for what you want, it's going to be 3K a month. And I was like, what do you mean 3K a month? Like, that's 30 grand a year-ish. I don't have 30 grand a year.
Yeah.
And then it made me realize, I was like, oh, so the clients you're working with, they're paying this much a month to try and get features in these big brands, but then they're finessing those big brands as if they've got it independently, but they haven't because you've helped them get there. And I was like, it doesn't seem a bit shady, but PR seems a little bit shady.
Well, I think there are lots of brands out there who wouldn't want to admit that they've got a PR getting these opportunities for them because they'd like people to believe that the hype is so big already.
Absolutely.
That they're getting these things organic.
Minimum 3K to get that hype.
Yeah. It can be. Again, I don't know who you went to, but you can sometimes go with like an independent freelancer who's just decided that they're going to take on their own clients. It won't cost you as much as that. But it depends who you get a good vibe with as well. You might think these are the people for me and that's just what it costs. But you do need to shop around like anything, I think. But yeah, people are surprised by the cost. But it's a really hard job and it's a lot of work. You are constantly chasing people, reaching out to new people, researching other people you haven't spoken to, facilitating meetings. There's a lot to do. And this is why a lot of people try to do their own PR first and go, actually, this is...
But then you have a number of clients.
Yeah.
You also host their events.
Mm-hmm.
You also do influencer gifting. You also do PR coverage. And then you manage a family. How do you break up your time? What is a kind of a day in the life of Amy look like?
Well, so usually I do the school pickup, but I still keep working after that, which is not ideal, but I can't finish work at 3 o'clock every day. So usually get the kids off to school. I usually catch up with my team in the morning, talk about, right, what do we all want to achieve this week? How's it going on this? How's it going on that? I then might have a client meeting. I try and get us to the gym during the day as well. I think that's really important to look after yourself and your mind as well. And then I'll usually do some pitching around just after lunchtime where I'm putting out a new story or chasing up on a story. Every day can look a little bit different, but essentially I do try and break it up with having a good understanding in the morning of what I want to achieve that day. And can I realistically finish it within those hours?
So would you rather have a big brand that pays you lots of bucks, but they're your only brand? Or would you have numerous smaller brands that don't pay you as much, but then you get to diversify not only your PR pool, but help more?
The second, for sure. For a start, just from a practical point of view, you lose that client, you've got no business anymore. Do you know what I mean? You've got to hedge your bets a little bit, and clients come and go. That's the nature of it. PR is a luxury for a lot of people. Not everybody can afford to have it. And sometimes when they've got to cut their costs, PR can be the first thing to go. So I have to always make sure that I'm open to new business and brands that come to me. But like I say, I just love working with nice people.
It's so important when you run your own business. You can make that decision. So would you rather an influencer who has a gifted product put out a content post which is shoddy and not great, or just not post?
Or just not post at all?
Yeah.
I'd have to, it depends. If it's really bad, like it's not showing the product in a good light, they've not talked about any of the good points about it, it's not putting across that message we want, then don't bother. Not at all, really. If it's not bringing any benefit to my client, then I'd rather they just didn't do it. Damage limitation in that case.
Absolutely. And for those individuals who want to get into PR, who want to start pitching and might be facing rejection or worrying about failure, what would your advice be to them?
So if you're wanting to get into PR, I would recommend learning from people who've been in it for longer than you. So I think working in an agency or in a brand as a junior would be my first port of call. But if you've got a brand yourself and you're dealing with you've been pitching and you're really struggling, I do think you should speak to a consultancy who can maybe help you restructure what you've been doing, because it might not be that there's anything wrong with your product, it's just the way you're going about it is wrong, and you're not pushing the key messages out there that the journalists want to hear. So I do think you can seek independent advice from people by the hour, even from PR professionals. You don't need to be splashing out the big bucks to work with somebody long term. You could just get a little bit of help and a little bit of redirection. But also persistence is key. If you're not hearing back from journalists in 1 week, that's honestly not surprising at all. It could take you several months to get back what you want. So yeah, just holding your nerve and being persistent is really important.
And then my final question is, based on what we started with, as an eldest daughter in an Asian family, what would your advice be to the eldest kids of Asian families who are just trying to figure it out and not mess up and follow their heart?
I would say that feeling of being always doing the right thing and making your parents proud is probably always going to be there. But also, your parents do love you. They do want your happiness as well. And I would encourage yourself to not do what you think is going to make everyone else happy. Do what serves you and do it well. And you will be a great example to the rest of the family of following your passions and breaking away from what's expected of you, but still smashing it, if you see what I mean.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for your time.
Very welcome. Thank you for having me.
And all of Amy's details are in the description, so definitely give her a follow and check out Lucky 8 PR. And remember to like, subscribe, and share this episode and all of our other amazing episodes. And tell us who you want us to interview, what topics you want us to talk about, and if we should stick to studio formats or video formats, and really just get into the process of helping us build together in public. Thank you.